How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and we've covered the West. We've covered the East. We've covered the South. Today, the unfiltered guide to Denver's North Metro suburbs, and we're talking about them starting right now. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. And listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons, moving to or around the Denver Metro and Colorado Front Range, this is definitely the channel for you, and you're going to want to click that subscribe button as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I try to be informative here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of the state's most talented realtors. And we're helping people like you move here each and every day. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I'm always the person, answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there, winning if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is the unfiltered guide to Denver's North Metro suburbs. So choosing a suburb isn't always about commute times and school ratings. It's about lifestyle, it's about affordability, it's about tolerance for HOAs. And when we talk about the suburbs north of Denver, it's a bit patchwork. You've got a lot of farmland or old farmland. You've got, communities that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then you have these newly developed communities with HOAs and how tolerant you are towards that. To do so, we begin with Northglenn, the last bastion, if you will, of old Denver affordability. The vibe of Northglenn is that it feels like a snapshot of a simpler time. It's unpretentious, with winding streets, mature trees, and you got a lot of brick homes that haven't been scraped and turned into these boxes that you see nowadays. There's a genuine working class soul to Northglenn, and I have to admit that's kind of missing in some of our other communities of Denver. It's going away to some extent. So the upside of Northglenn is going to be pretty clear. You're talking about affordability meeting access. This is one of the few places left where you can find a single family home under the regional median home price without sentencing yourself to some crazy commute. Northglenn has that mid-century charm and freedom, for that matter. No HOAs or very few HOAs. So if you love a big backyard, if you hate cookie cutter design, then most of Northglenn was built before HOAs became the fun police. You get character and freedom, so you get a big backyard, and if you want to park your boat in your driveway, odds are you're going to be allowed to. And then you're starting to see within Northglenn an amount of civic pride. You see the city is reinvesting in itself with a new civic center, rec center upgrades, park improvements. It's a sign that Northglenn is not content being left behind. Now there's a reality check to all of this, because at the end of the day, character can be expensive. That mid-century charm that often comes from 60-year-old plumbing, original single-pane windows, and electrical panels that are ancient, that can't handle a microwave and a Peloton. So you've got some infrastructure issues there. You have to budget for potentially major updates, because you might find older homes there. Inconsistent schools is a common piece of feedback I get from people, that school performance can be block by block. So you want to be very specific in your search there. Make sure you know the schools, whether it matters to you or not, that are in your community. If top tier schools are your number one priority, you'll need to be more specific with your homework going into Northglenn. Again, not to say that Northglenn has bad schools. I would never say such a thing, not even from a legal standpoint, just because it's not a fact, but you do want to do your due diligence there. And then there's a case of Northglenn of what you see is what you get. There's very little new construction. The housing stock is finite, which preserves the character, but it also limits your options. So the bottom line to Northglenn is that buyers who value neighborhood feel and are over kind of the new build shine, that's going to be a great community for you. Next up, we have Thornton, Colorado, kind of the sprawling every suburb. So for Thornton, it really doesn't have one identity, at least not that I see. It has three or four. It stretches from gritty to industrial adjacent areas in the south to shiny new developments in the north. It's a workhorse suburb that delivers convenience and options, but it struggles to feel like one cohesive community, if you will. And I have to admit, Thornton, I often reflect on my own suburb of Lakewood. Thornton and Lakewood have a touch of that, where it's not necessarily you go into that suburb and you just know what you're going to see all the way through. So the upside, I like to use the term smorgasbord, so we're going to keep using it. There is a smorgasbord of housings. You can find 90s bungalows, you can find 90s two-story homes, you can find sprawling new builds and master plan communities. I mean, there's really a price point and a style for everyone in Thornton. Among the things that people rave about the most is the N line, which is one of our light rail lines that heads through Thornton, has been a game changer for the community. So the arrival of that light rail, especially the East Lake Station, that's been a big one, has fundamentally changed the commute. It's changed how a lot of people are dealing with getting around in Thornton. And you also see around that East Lake Station, they're starting to build some community there. There's a bit of walkability. There's some different shops and different things to do there. So it's been a very pleasant upgrade to Thornton. And then when you talk about ultimate convenience, you hear a lot about your access. Costco, Cabela's, outlet malls, every chain restaurant known to man, whether it's your thing or not. You're never more than a 10-minute drive from all of these amenities. And so you'll hear people in neighboring communities like a Westminster, like a Broomfield, they'll often pop over to Thornton for some of those conveniences. So first is that, geographic identity crisis. And I'm sorry, you're gonna hear the term vibe or energy. I'll try to say energy instead of vibe, it's overused. So the energy of South Thornton near Denver is completely different from the energy of North Thornton near 470. It can feel a little disjointed and it lacks this central unifying downtown area. And again, if you've watched any of my videos, if you know anything about me, I love me a good downtown area. And Thornton at this point is still missing it. So Thornton and Lakewood, if you're listening to me, build a downtown. We really want one. I would also say for Northglenn, traffic can be no joke. And I'm trying not to be redundant in some of these communities, but when you get around like I-25 and 104th, 120th, it can get pretty clustery. Those streets can get pretty busy. A lot of these service roads, Colorado Boulevard can become parking lots during peak hours. And your proximity to I-25 is both a blessing and a curse for that reason, because you have a lot of people moving to these communities and dumping onto I-25. And then the last thing I would mention about Thornton is that a car is king. The odds are you are going to need a car. Outside of the newer self-contained developments there, this is a car-dependent suburb. Don't expect to walk to grocery stores. Don't expect to walk to shops. Again, not to say that there's a ton of suburb communities where you're walking to your grocery, but Thornton is going to be one of those communities where you need a vehicle. Next up on the list, we go to Westminster, Colorado, a community that's growing on me. I'm starting to learn more and more about Westminster, and it's kind of the chameleon, or I should say the centrally located chameleon, if you will. So if Westminster was a student, it would be a well-rounded one, who's good at everything, but isn't the valedictorian of any single subject. So it strikes this solid balance between urban areas and development and this suburban space. So it's got trails, it's got lakes, it's got shopping, and it's also a straight shot to Denver and Boulder, which is, again, one of the key factors of some of these northern suburbs is that people want that proximity to be able to get to Denver if they need to, but they also want to get to Boulder for some of its amenities. So upsides of Westminster, the dual commute champion is what I would say. Its location is arguably the biggest asset that Westminster has going for it. So if you're living with someone else, your significant other works in Boulder and you work in Denver, you're right in the middle. You have quick drives to either, access to either. Westminster is really a perfect strategic compromise if you're trying to get to both locations. Remember when I mentioned my love for downtowns? Westminster has reimagined downtown. So they have built over the last couple years this massive redevelopment of the old Westminster Mall into a modern, walkable downtown that is really giving the city a much needed focal point. Again, a lot of these Denver suburbs didn't have that, and they're starting to realize this is important to people. So you've got an Origin Hotel, you've got some great restaurants, you've got an Alamo Draft House, you've got a Vatos Tacos, which I might have had lunch at very recently. So just this really central, I wouldn't say central to Westminster, but this location that everybody can dump into. And when we talk about access to the outdoors with Stanley Lake, a huge network of trails, countless parks, it doesn't feel like a concrete jungle. The Westminster off-leash dog park is also one of my absolute favorite places to take the pups, take the kiddo, let the dogs just go crazy. It's fantastic. So, you have the mountains right there. Westminster is going to be one of those northern communities. It's a large. So again, when I talk about the sprawl and some of the differences of the community, lots of outdoor activities to get into. So as far as like your reality check of Westminster, and I mentioned this when it comes to these northern suburbs, is that you might get a little bit of whiplash as you drive through the communities, because you'll see, these modest 1970s split levels right next to a brand new $1 million modern farmhouse. Unlike a Thornton and unlike a Northglenn, where you don't tend to see that as much. Not to say it doesn't exist. So that lack of consistent architectural style can feel like a choice. I mean, it can feel a little different. Compared to the first two, Westminster is also somewhat of a pricey proposition, depending on the neighborhood you're in, certainly. So for its age and its lack of a strong brand, Westminster can be surprisingly expensive. And again, I think you're paying for that, not just for the house, not just for some of the amenities, but that location. The fact that it is becoming more important for people to live close to Denver, but also that access to not just Boulder, but some of the neighborhoods and suburbs around Boulder. And then I think the last thing, and again, this is somewhat redundant of different suburbs, but that identity piece. I think the downtown of Westminster helps, but it's still searching for an identity. You ask someone to describe, Westminster's brand, and you're likely to get kind of a shrug. I mean, it's solid, it's reliable, but it kind of lacks this distinct personality that communities like Broomfield or Lafayette, that we're going to touch on soon, have. So the bottom line of Westminster is, for the buyer who values location and balance above all else, it's going to be pretty top on your list. It's an ideal landing spot for a family with maybe some mixed commute needs, or a house of people who need to get to different places. But it has great access to the Front Range, and that's a key thing for it. Getting farther north, getting over to Boulder, getting to Denver, you're in an ideal location. Rolling along with just a couple more to cover, we have Broomfield, which is like the corporate powerhouse. It's like the polished community. So Broomfield, for the most part, is clean, it's organized, it's very intentional. It feels like a city/county, it's a city and county together, designed, on a spreadsheet. And that's not an entirely bad thing. I know the way I said it doesn't sound the best, but I mean, it's a magnet for families. It's a magnet for tech professionals who are drawn for top tier schools and pristine parks and corporate headquarters. I mean, Broomfield has been, in my humble opinion, very well thought out. So your upside to Broomfield, it's a family-friendly haven. The schools are consistently ranked among the best in the area. You combine that with endless parks, sports fields, trail systems, and I mean, listen, you have a recipe for raising kids. End of the day. Do you have to have kids to live in Broomfield? No, it's not a requirement of any HOA yet. But just as far as families, big haven. Broomfield is also becoming a tech and corporate hub. They have major employers. Oracle's there. Vail Resorts is there. I mean, many residents can work and live within the same zip code at high-paying jobs, and that is genuinely a luxury in a metropolitan area. So that interlocking loop, if you will, out of Broomfield mainly on Route 36, that is now rivaling the Denver Tech Center of Greenwood Village. And then the last thing is that Broomfield has, if you're for this, a ton of master planned communities. That means everything just works. The roads are well maintained, the landscaping is immaculate, the amenities are top notch. Yes, you'll have an HOA to go with that. We're going to talk about that. But I mean, some of these communities are stunning. Now the reality check. Yes, master planned communities come with HOAs, and the HOA is watching. So if you have a creative vision for your home, and the pink paint that you're going to throw on it, or something wild you're going to do with your front yard, or you have a deep love for street parking your RV, you might not last long. Okay, the HOAs are notoriously strict in Broomfield. Going along with that, starter home is a relative term, and Broomfield might be one of those areas where affordability can be, let's face it, a major issue. So the entry point into Broomfield is significantly higher than the majority of its neighbors, than a Westminster, a Thornton, a Northglenn, certainly on average, median price, all of those things. You're likely to see more expense overall in Broomfield. And certainly as you get into some of its higher tier neighborhoods. I mean, Broomfield has some extremely nice, luxurious neighborhoods. And golf courses, obviously, if that's your thing. And one of the other knocks of Broomfield that I hear from time to time is that it can feel a bit sterile there. The trade-off for all that organization and newness is kind of a lack of grit, a lack of character, if you will. And, I've heard more than one person say that, that corporate feel, it can feel more like a corporate campus than a community with a deep history. Broomfield is also lacking that downtown area. I'll knock any suburb for it, and I'll cherish every suburb who has one. So again, now that's Broomfield, Thornton, and Lakewood. Listen to me, build a downtown. We need it. Northglenn, you're on the hook too. So the bottom line for Broomfield is that if you're a buyer who is prioritizing schools, safety, a well-ordered life, and listen, you're willing to pay a premium for it. And again, you don't have to have kids. Schools are important. If you're buying a house, schools are important generally because of your home value. But if those are things that are important to you, Broomfield is a low drama, high quality life choice, and certainly a community you're going to want to check out. Now, to keep this video from going an hour, I have a few honorable mentions that I'm not going to go into as much detail on as we extend this drive. All the communities we talked about, you could realistically reach within 30 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic, or faster, certainly. But we're going to talk about some others. So we begin with Brighton, Colorado, which is northeast of Denver. For those who want actual space, we're talking larger lots, agricultural zoning, and really a true small town downtown area. Brighton has a lot going for it. The trade-off is going to be a longer commute. You're looking at about 45 minutes, and probably if you have heavy traffic coming out of northeast Denver, you're probably looking at an hour, but I'd say 45 minutes, probably safer. There's a vibe that can feel a bit on the industrial fringe. It's right there. We mentioned earlier heading towards out of Westminster and out of Broomfield, getting up into Boulder. Broomfield and Westminster, all of these northern suburbs have that quick access. On the way, you are going to run into 3 suburbs: Superior, Lafayette, Louisville. We're going to touch briefly on Lafayette and Louisville as right now the most popular 2. So think Boulder light, if you will. These 2 are often lumped together, and they have a distinct feel to them. Lafayette is artsy, it's a bit funky, it's got a fantastic walkable old downtown, kind of small, whereas Louisville is consistently ranked as one of the best places in the country to live. It's quiet, it's educated, it's extremely family friendly, and it does have a high price tag. One thing you'll notice about Louisville and Lafayette is that not necessarily people who want to live in Boulder, but people who love the Boulder vibe. But there I go saying vibe again. Boulder energy. Boulder. I gotta pull out a thesaurus apparently. But people who maybe don't want that Boulder price tag, they'll look to Louisville, to Lafayette. There's some different options there, but still with that energy. And again, I mentioned Superior as that third. Absolutely a community you are going to want to check out. Just helped actually a YouTube family move to Superior just this week. They're building a downtown area, just FYI. And then last one I have to mention for the sake of this video is Erie, Colorado, located just north, straight up I-25. So Erie is about a 45 minute hour drive if there's traffic from Denver. So, it's basically, if we're talking South Denver, Castle Rock would be its rough equivalent of drive time and distance. Erie is the undisputed king of new growth. When I was a kid, there was nothing in Erie but a racetrack that still exists. Now, if you want a brand new home with mountain views in a rapidly growing community, Erie is your spot. The catch to that is that there is a chance you're going to be living in a construction zone for the foreseeable future. And the town right now is split into 2 different communities. Part of it's in Boulder County, part of it is in Weld County. So your property taxes can be a little wonky. Erie is nationally, top 10, one of the fastest growing towns. It's got a great downtown, again, I'm going to keep playing that up. These new communities, new schools, a lot to see in Erie. So if I'm talking about heading to these northern suburbs, if you want to be within 10, 20, 30 minutes of Denver, easy. Northglenn, Thornton, Westminster, all going to give you that option. Broomfield right on the edge. If you want to spread a little farther, that's when you're going to get into the Louisville, Superior, Lafayette, Brighton, Erie. And if you want to go farther than that, that's a perfect opportunity to hit me up with a phone call, text, email, always the person answering those, if you will. In the meantime, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. That was the unfiltered guide to Denver's North Metro suburbs. Until I see you next time, peace.